Welcome to the 180 Days podcast. We are on episode 2 of season 3. And in this episode, we'll be talking to Dr. Greg Hessee, who is an AP coordinator at
Colegio Nueva Granada. There we go. Is that where you just put the blank and we popped in the name?
Right. So he works with Tim, but he's been working with lots of states and some initiatives from Colorado on how to improve or get an AP program started and how to make it more equitable so that more students are involved in AP courses and rigorous learning. So that is what our session is about today. But before we get started, I'm Karen Greenhouse, one of your hosts.
And I'm Tim Pope, the other host. I remembered this time to say my name. Woo woo.
That is exciting for all of us. Eventually, we'll get this down smooth. And so as our new season starts, we are doing a Notice and Wonder section at the beginning. And I went first last time. So Tim, why don't you start us off with your notice and wondering in education for this episode?
So we are recording this just as it's our last week of school at my school before the winter holidays, and we go away for 3 weeks. And I noticed, like many high schools, I know some high schools like in the southern US, this is like exam week and they're ending their semester, and other high schools will be finishing their semesters up when we come back from the holidays, which is the case at my school. But just as in almost every high school, this is like the time where all of a sudden all my students care about their grades. So that's what I have noticed. That all right, like wait a minute. Especially now, I teach juniors, and so like the whole
grade point average.
Many of my students are college bound in the States, college bound students, and so they're like, it really matters. And so that's my notice. And so what I wonder is what can I do? What can I do? What can our school do to sort of change that culture? Because the culture is all about getting this number. We do standards-based grading on my school on a 4-point scale. So it's a number, not a letter at my school. But what do we do to change the culture? Or what can I do to change the culture around learning so kids have some genuine, they just have a desire to learn the math and get the grade. Like, I understand the importance of the grade. I mean, these kids are getting a lot of pressure from themselves and from their families, especially at a school where the kids do come from wealthier backgrounds. Like, it's not just go to college. It's you need to get into an Ivy League school. Or I had a kid who is all nervous because I guess Stanford is sending out their acceptances here in a couple of days. So what can we do? What can I do to change that culture? I guess is my wonder. I'm wondering what I can do.
That's a great wonder. And it actually ties in, I believe Greg later in the episode actually talks about, the expectations and that pressure to perform, both students and teachers. So I think it's a great question. And if anyone has answers, please send us a note on our website so that maybe we'll have you on to share your answers, because I don't know how to answer the question. For me, again, end of the semester in Drexel University where I teach. And what I have been noticing for the first time ever is I have really had, so my students are all teachers, right? So they're teaching in classrooms all over, middle, high school, whatever. But I have noticed this semester in particular, it started a little bit in the summer, is students, so my teachers, struggling to complete their coursework. And I've had several who just can't complete it. They've asked for incomplete. Some have literally just said, can't do this anymore, and they've dropped out. And it seems like the pressure of teaching has become so overwhelming that they can't do both. And so I just wonder, is this typical? Are all teachers struggling? I mean, obviously I have teachers who are taking classes and teaching, so that's a struggle, but it's never been this apparent how much they are struggling and that they're actually quitting their courses because they can't do both anymore. So I just wonder if all teachers are struggling. Is it because of the pandemic and the impacts from last year, and how starting back in classrooms is changed how they have to teach? I also know there's a lot of teachers that did not come back. So is it the shortage of teachers? And so teachers who do come back have more students and more work. I just wonder what is causing all of this stress.
It really is an interesting deal. And I don't know if Greg mentioned this in an interview or not. All right, tearing down the third wall. We talked to Greg like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But he moved here from Denver, and he had shared with me recently that there were public schools. Some of the schools in Denver were going back virtual, not because of COVID, but teachers leaving mid-year, like just at the end of their rope, and just saying, I can't do this anymore, and resigning their positions mid-year, which that to me it's just unknown.
I've had friends who are teachers in this area doing the same thing. And I just went to a movie with a friend of mine who's a teacher, and she said, oh, I've been having to take my free time, my planning time, and sub in other classes because there's no subs and the teachers aren't there. And so it seems to be a huge issue. Teacher stress, teachers not coming back to teaching anymore or quitting. So I just wonder, how's that going to impact, learning?
And like your notice and wonder, like how much of that is COVID related? How much of that is just is COVID like just the straw that broke the camel's back on teachers who are already just overwhelmed and frustrated with the state of affairs, and then COVID was just another thing that just made it beyond a point where folks felt that they could succeed professionally or even grin and bear it. It's that's a whole episode in and of itself.
Okay. So this is what I'm thinking about our notice and wonder section. We have no answers, but it really does make me think about future episodes. Let's find people who might have answers or thoughts or suggestions. So that's what our notice and wonder is going to be about, future episode conversations. Though I will say, let's get into Greg, because he does actually address some of these notice and wonderings from both of us, actually, in his talk. So let's get into that now.
He does, and stay tuned. He's fantastic. So I have the privilege of teaching with Greg. We teach together at Colegio Nueva Granada still down here in Bogota. New season, same place for me. But Greg, the reason we asked Greg to join us today is Greg, along with being a teacher at CNG, is also our AP coordinator. And prior to coming to CNG, has done extensive work in Colorado, working with nonprofits in terms of trying to support students and teachers in schools in building and developing an AP program. So who better to talk to about AP than the man who lives and breathes it for a living? So welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me, everyone.
And before we let Greg explain a little bit about his background, let's just clarify. AP stands for Advanced Placement Courses. So AP Calculus, AP Statistics, AP History, things like that. So Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I'd love to. So first of all, guys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I haven't been on a podcast in a month of Sundays. So let's see. I taught inner city United States, New York, Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado.
Ah.
And when I was in Denver, I had the opportunity to teach AP because the teacher who taught it before me had moved to another school, which is how it worked back then. You waited until someone moved on or someone died, and then you had the opportunity to take their spot as the AP lead for the school. So
I think it still works that way. I hate to say, I think that's still the tradition. Yeah.
Seniority is still determined entirely by age in the school system. So found my way into an AP English language and composition course that I was running. The very first year that I was going to teach, I had a student come up to me and he said, it's a pretty diverse school. And it wasn't admittedly a very diverse AP program. And he came up to me and he said, I want to take that AP Lang class you're teaching next year. And I said, it's the most advanced pace writing course in the school, and writing is your weakest area. And he said, yeah, that's why I want to take the class. And it was a real shift for me because I had, if I'm being honest, had been very excited about teaching the cream of the crop, the kids who were most prepared for and most engaged in English classes, and we'd sit back and pontificate in our jackets with little elbow patches. And this student really changed my thinking. And he was a Ghanaian refugee, an English language learner. Writing was definitely his weakest area, and he took the course. I allowed him to take the courses, which is what we did back then. And he struggled mightily the whole year. And at the end of the year in AP classes, there's an AP exam that you score 1 through 5 upon. And generally, a 3 is considered a qualifying score in that it's passing and gives you credit in colleges often. He got a 1. The next year, he took AP English Literature, got a 1 on that exam too. A few years later, he's in Carleton College, and he sends a letter to my principal extolling the virtues of AP Lang and Dr. Hessee, which my principal reads out to the whole faculty and makes me feel like $1 million. A few years later, he's the keynote speaker at a summer institute that I'm running. He is got a PhD in public health from Emory University, a university he decided to attend because it was so close to the CDC where he wanted to work. Now he was working for the National Institutes of Health and working on meningitis prevention in Western Africa. So by any metric, this student is absurdly more successful than I'll ever be. But there was a time in his life when I was telling him, you're not prepared enough to take this course with me. So based on the experience I had with him in that year where I saw him grow at such an extreme rate, we went out and started recruiting for the course. And we more than doubled the number of students in the course. The pass rate, that is the percentage of kids earning that qualifying score of 3 or above, didn't change, but the demographics changed dramatically, which made me realize that prior to that endeavor, we had been engaging in some extremely racist practices. Not intentionally, but we've been upholding a system that was inherently discriminatory. So I worked with that school and with the district in which it sat in Denver to overcome some of those discriminatory practices. And a few years later, I found out about a grant that was working to do the same. It was with a group called the National Math and Science Initiative, based out of Dallas, Texas. And they had been working for some time in a number of states around the nation to do the exact same thing, only not just in English. They've been working in math, science, and English to increase the number and diversity of students succeeding in AP courses. And a grant had come to the state of Colorado through the U.S. Department of Education. And I went after the grant on behalf of my school, and somehow in the process wound up becoming the director of the grant program. So I came back to my principal and said, I'm not sure we're getting the grant this year, but I think they offered me a job. So for the next few years, I ran that program, 55 schools across the state of Colorado. And we witnessed really the same thing that I saw in my own classes, where you'd see a dramatic uptick in the number of students. Generally, in the first year, we saw around an 80% increase in number of students enrolled in advanced placement courses, and around a 70% increase in qualifying scores. But when you broke that down demographically in rural schools, with students of color, Black and brown students specifically, and with students of poverty, you saw a much larger uptick in enrollment. And that uptick in qualifying scores actually outpaced the uptick in enrollment. So that is to say that although they dramatically increased the number of students enrolled in AP courses, they simultaneously were increasing the pass rate for those historically underrepresented kiddos, which was, you couldn't ask for better data, right? So as a fundraiser, it was somewhat fish in a bucket, because you could go around and just say, look, here's what's happening. Who wants to help?
That's amazing. So is that, you're gone now. You're gone from there. Is that continued, that growth, that data?
Yeah. So we had, when we first started the program, we had, I think, 23 applicants for 10 spots the first year. Over the course of the program, we were able to raise enough money that we supported every school who applied. And inevitably, the organization went through what most nonprofits do, a kind of internal restructuring. I was promoted to a position that wasn't specific to this AP program. I stayed in it for a couple of years, and then, much like our man Tim Pope here, you're out of the classroom long enough and you forget what it is that you're talking about. At least for me, that was I had become disconnected from the work that I was supporting people to do. And I really wanted to get back in the classroom. And inevitably out here in Bogota, I found a job where I got to bring my AP expertise and my interest in being in the classroom onto one campus. So I've been here for a couple of years.
So I'm curious because what you were talking about in the beginning, how AP courses are in a system that is actually very racist. If you look across the country, it's very typical that AP has a very low representation of students of color and poverty. So you were talking about a grant and funding. What is that for? So, because it almost seems like you really need to change the mindset of just letting schools let students apply and get into these courses more than they do. And so why does it require funding?
Yeah. And and you said it perfectly. It really is about academic mindset, right? And the research on those non-cognitive skills that add up to academic mindset talk about this need to feel as though you belong, to feel as though the work in which you're engaging is relevant, and to feel as though you can be successful. And then the fourth part of that is kind of a growth mindset, to recognize failure as a challenge and not as an indication that you do not belong, you can't be successful. So how do you create that academic mindset? The NIMSI program, the National Math and Science Initiatives program, was really all around that. So the idea was the first thing that we need to do is provide professional development to teachers so that they can start to believe that this is possible. Because when you walk up to an AP teacher, you say, hey, I'm going to double the number of kids in your class. The natural reaction is to think, well, then you're going to have the pass rate, right? I've already got all the kids who can pass. You're going to give me a bunch of kids who can't. And that's honestly, that's how I felt when I saw my numbers double after I recruited. I just didn't, at that time, I wasn't concerned with that. I never would have guessed that my pass rate wouldn't change. So we engaged in a great deal of professional development to convince them that maybe they still had that healthy skepticism that what we were saying was untrue. But we would convince them at least to engage in a safe and modest test of their underlying beliefs, right? So that would help the teachers. In addition, we financially incentivized them. So you got $100 for every student who earned a qualifying score on the AP exam associated with your course. So if you had 6 kids in the room, you could potentially earn $600. If you had 6D kids in the room, you could potentially earn $6,000. So that also helped. At the same time, we provided the same incentive for students. So we gave them $100 if they earned a qualifying score.
No.
Now, there's a lot of research that shows that incentivizing assessment scores with financial supports is unsuccessful. And this actually doesn't contradict that. The $100 was offered it was brought up to students when they registered for the course. And the concept wasn't, okay, you'll learn more because we're paying you to do so. The concept was you can overcome some of the expectations placed upon you by your peer group by referencing this money. So more specifically, that is to say, if someone approaches you and says, why are you taking that class? Why are you taking this AP class? What do you think? You're smart? You think you're white? You can say, hey, I get $100 for my science class. What do you get for yours? Which is a pretty good response. And then additionally, we provide Saturday study sessions for students to ensure that they are getting all the support they needed to be as successful as they could be. So that was really, it was a holistic kind of approach used to transform the concept at the school. And the dream was, and we saw this in quite a few campuses, not all of them by any means, that once you created an environment in which students expected to take AP Computer Science as freshmen, AP Lang as juniors, it became something that the students expected of themselves, and you no longer had to expect of them. So it became interwoven into the culture at the school.
Right. So obviously, there's not limitless funds. So once the funds are gone, is the enrollment continuing, or has that not happened yet where the funds are gone?
So Dallas ISD was the first school district to do this, and you can look online and check their results because the National Math and Science Initiative is still quite proud of that. But you see the same thing in Colorado schools. For the most part, if you average it, you see that not only does it maintain, but there tends to be a slight dip after what we found in Colorado, anyways. There was a slight dip after the funding left, and then the numbers began to increase again. So you didn't see a change in the number of qualifying scores, but you did see a dip in the number of students enrolled. And then after that, you would see it grow again. Now that's on average. If you look across school by school, class by class, things will change. Tim Pope is a very popular teacher. I'm sure if you were to leave the building and we got a new computer science teacher, you might see a change in enrollment based on word of mouth around the school of who wants to take whose class. But yeah, the idea is once you have a school where everyone knows that as a junior you take AP Lang, you have a school where everyone knows as a junior you take AP Lang, and it doesn't require individually convincing each child.
Yeah, and you've created that belief that everyone could do it because they're looking at the classes and seeing there's this diverse group. So one of the things you said at the beginning when you were talking about how you got to choose who was in the class and you were reluctant to take this student. I think that still happens in a majority of the places. I travel around the country and work with schools, and it is still a lot based on the decision of the AP teacher, whether you get in or you don't get into a course. So how do you change that mindset?
Oh yes, Greg. Please share. How do you change that mindset?
Oh dear. Did I spark something?
Well, once you get into the nuance of each campus, the answer I feel gets more complicated because there are schools that use AP for different purposes, right? There are schools that use AP to provide every student with the promise of a high school diploma, which is college or career ready, right? So we are going to use AP to ensure that you have the type of accelerated learning necessary to graduate prepared to engage in post-secondary education. There are schools that feel that their remediation rates, that is to say, the percentage of their students who go on to college and find that they're ill-prepared, are so low that they use AP just for college proficiency. So we're using AP just to ensure you get a qualifying score so you decrease the amount of time you have to spend in post-secondary learning. That all being said, what I found in the years that I engaged in this work to be most effective was actual modeling. If you could get a teacher or 5 in the school to go out and recruit for their class and then have unbelievable results, and unbelievable because people literally didn't believe such a thing would happen, where they doubled the number of kids and doubled the number of qualifying scores. Those teachers tend to get lauded publicly in the school. The students tend to talk about them. Everyone tends to hear about that course or those courses. And it becomes, maybe positive peer pressure, because the issue isn't just that a teacher is saying, no, you can't take my class. That's an issue. But it's also that the teacher isn't saying, hey, come take my class, right? College Board has really made it clear that every school that engages in AP needs to practice open enrollment. Every school doesn't necessarily apply that, but that's the theory. But open enrollment simply means that we don't have barriers that we have put in place. So you don't have to write an essay, hit a certain metric on a test score, yada, yada. But that doesn't address the barrier that exists within the student and within our societies, right? I mean, this is embedded within the very hegemony of American society, that these students feel like they don't belong, and they know AP is for other kids, not kids who look like me. So it's not so much about removing those barriers that the school puts in place. It's about removing the barriers that exist in the society in which we live, which means going out and actively recruiting. So schools that see someone doing that tend to start falling in that direction. And that's what the grant program was about, was to convince a bunch of people to start doing that, even if they didn't believe it would work. And then they saw it work, they changed their processes. Obviously, you're not going to bring that specific grant to every high school in the nation. So the question is, how do you, start pockets of innovative recruitment and then make them extraordinarily public, so everyone realizes that this is doable, and this is something that I should emulate as an educator.
So then how do you address, like, I'm just thinking of the teachers that I know that have taught AP, and getting the majority of their students to get that 3, 4, or 5 is a huge push. Like, it's almost a requirement. And if you don't reach whatever that goal is, then maybe you're not going to teach AP the next year. So what's going to change their mind if they don't have a grant or some type of incentive to, because you said you're the student that you gave as an example, he scored a 1 both years, right? And yet now he's this amazing, successful person, and he learned a lot in your class, and you said he had growth. But as a teacher who's looking for scores, I might say I don't want him in my class because I don't want someone who gets a 1.
Yeah, and that's something that anyone who's ever taught AP and gone to an AP Summer Institute has encountered. We used to call it the pass rate pissing contest, right? Not so subtly, somewhere in our conversation, you're going to mention it's an 87%.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to suddenly fall into that same false meritocracy that you've created and start thinking, well, God, I'm only a 43%. Maybe we should all stand in a row at the back of the class, which is funny because it's the same thing we do to students, but that's a different matter. I think that one of the things we attempted to do is to provide College Board sanctioned professional development that really spoke against that, right? So we created an AP for All Summer Institute in Metro Denver that is still ongoing today, that was really trying to focus on, we bring in presenters who had success in diverse areas. We offered breakout sessions that were actually in some ways mandatory that focused on different ways to support historically underrepresented students, and really tried to break that mentality that a lot of teachers bring to the table of, I am judged by the rate at which my students pass. So working at the teacher level, I think professional learning needs to change its tune and make sure that those people running professional learning, when they hear that conversation in the class, shut it down. And it's not hard to shut down. As the leader of the facilitator of the room, you can really easily step up and say, we shouldn't judge ourselves on our 5s because we all know they walk in the room 5s. All you did is not get in the way. We should judge ourselves on our 2s. How many kids who didn't have the opportunity to get a 2 when they walked in the room did you bring to the point of scoring a 2? The other thing I think is really working with schools. We in paper performance programs particularly, and I know we have some Texans in the room. Dallas was a big pay for performance district for some time. This notion of the metrics that you use to determine a teacher's efficacy sometimes includes AP. And across the board, the denominator is the number of students in the course, not the number of students in the school, which is a mistake. I think saying, you have a 95% pass rate. Well, that's great. You've got 20 kids who took the class, but there's 240 in the graduating class. How is it only 20 joined? We should be judged by what we do for all students, not what we do for the few students we call out, Thomas Jefferson style, and provide a unique opportunity to.
I want to stay on this whole equity piece, but take it in a little bit of a different direction. So you talked about like open enrollment in AP and lowering barriers. I feel weird asking you questions because like Greg and I know each other and I know what he's going to say, but I want to ask you anyway.
It's a softball. Let's see it.
But can you talk a bit about what is pre-AP and a pre-AP program? And what I want you to specifically address is how can you build a pre-AP program without it becoming what it has become in many schools, which is a de facto tracking program, which is the exact opposite of opening doors. It's actually closing doors, just closing them earlier.
Yeah. That's actually a harder question than maybe it sounds to some of your listeners. How do you avoid tracking is in some subjects quite simple. In other subjects, more content-based subjects, more math-based subjects, where you have students coming out of multiple schools where they were already tracked, it's a little more complicated. But even more so, I remember when I first started running this program, I was working with one of the largest schools in Colorado, and it was a real high need school. 90 plus percent students of color, 90 plus percent students of poverty. And we had a teacher there who, after the first year, said, this has been great. I just wish we could do this with all our classes. And, it made me think, there's nothing magic in AP. There's no fairy dust that makes these courses. It's a test, and it's a framework, and it's a group of teachers who talk together every now and again about what it should look like. It's just, it's so faith-based, It's that the students walk into that room. The example I used to give when I talked to other teachers was, I remember when I taught in inner city New York, and I had a student who just drove me nuts all the time. And I'm not going to use his real name because he's out there somewhere, and he knows I'm talking about him. But my wife would always come to prom with me. That was the one school obligation she'd attend. And we'd get there, and we'd be standing and greeting students, and in would come Norman. And he'd walk up and he'd say, "Good evening, Dr. Hessee." He'd shake my hand and he'd kiss my wife's, and he'd walk into the dance. And my wife would be like, "That's Norman?" And I'm like, "No, man, that's prom Norman." You know what I mean? Like, he put on a tuxedo, and he's out at prom. He's a different person here. Like, he's a different persona. You got to see like Friday period 7 Norman. That's a different Norman. And it was the same way in AP classes because it was faith-based, right? The students believed that this was the place where they were getting prepared for college, and that this was the rigorous room. And they came in and they weren't Norman, they were prom Norman. And even if I had a student in creative writing and in AP, often they'd be a different student, even though there was the same kid, because in AP, you acted differently. So how do we lend that same kind of gravitas to all of our courses? Tracking, I'm I'm in a dangerous place to make this statement, but there's not like a debate on tracking any longer. We have sufficient research to show that it is unsuccessful. It does nothing to better prepare our advanced learners, and it does everything to more poorly prepare our historically underrepresented students. We have a ton of data that supports that statement. We need to get rid of that. And then we need to offer courses that we understand, that students understand are meaningful for their academic futures. Courses that they see as relevant, courses they believe they belong in, and courses in which they believe they can be successful. And then we need to support them over the course of their time in those courses to recognize that every time they feel challenged and frustrated, that's a sign that they're growing through their zones of proximal development, not a sign that they're dumb.
In connection to that, we also need to train teachers, provide teachers ways to make courses more rigorous, no matter what they're teaching, and believe that all their students can be successful and not hold back based on their expectations.
I mean, yes, obviously, like I said, Greg and I've had this conversation more times than he probably wishes we did. Greg's also a Detroit Lions fan, so he has certain mental deformities that he shares with me.
Patience. Absurd patience.
But no, seriously, so we're at a school together that, tracking sort of a thing that's just not going to go away anytime soon. We have a parent community and an administrative community that just really believes in the value of it. So it's not going anywhere. So, and I know that I don't think we're unique amongst the schools that people work at. So a project that Greg's working on that I want you to talk about, Greg, because I think it's just outstanding. Basically what he's doing is we're in the process of like, all right, well, what do we need to do so that our regular level courses is what they call them now are all going to be transitioned into being the pre-AP courses. So we're still going to have the tracking, and they're in year one of this project right now. But Greg, talk a bit about what you're doing to work with, like this year, our 9th grade teachers to do exactly what Karen's talking about. How are we getting those teachers so that the teachers who traditionally are teaching those regular level are like, no, this is now a pre-AP course and this is what we need to do. So just share a bit.
Yeah. No, I'd love to. Like Tim said, tracking is not going anywhere. And it's not me and Tim's school. So we accept that and figure out if this is the lay of the land, how do you make the land as beneficial for all students as possible? So there's a couple pieces to that. I'm going to start from a direction that maybe, Tim, you weren't expecting because you don't know about this, but our leader of the school recently sent me the name of 12 international schools who are ones that we admire because they are, quite frankly, some of the quote unquote best schools in the world. And he asked me to look into their honors programs so that we can really surround, almost triangulate the research on this. Like, let's see what honors looks like in our school. Let's look into, research that we have where we actually had a researcher come out and do some work at our school where they analyze what the honors program is and should be. And then let's look at other schools. So these other schools, there are 12 of them. I'll tell you, across these 12 schools, only 2 provide any kind of tracking prior to the decision to either engage in AP or IB diploma programs. It really is something that I think most schools have successfully realized is not the dream. Now, that doesn't mean most schools don't do it. They do. Most schools also realize that 7:45, 8 start time is detrimental to student learning, and yet most schools still engage in something similar. But when you look at these schools, one of the 2 that offers tracking is probably the best school in the world by most international accounts, which is located in Singapore, where my man Tom Boasberg is still running things. And their tracking is into something not called honors or pre-AP, but it's called advanced topics. And I just pulled this up the other day, so I really would like to share it just real briefly. Advanced topics courses are designed to foster the development of 21st century skills, as well as provide opportunities for students to showcase these skills in ways that are both authentic and unique. So they're really project-based. And this is the same thing that came out of the research that was done on our campus. Very often when we say rigor, what we mean is more. We mean, more questions on the worksheet in math. We mean more essays in English or more word count to those essays. Or even like more perspectives that you have to analyze. What we don't mean is more relevant, more authentic, right? We just mean more stuff. And so what we've started doing at our school is 2 things. One, we've implemented a pre-AP program that every student's in pre-AP. So that I think is beneficial to mindset, right? Because every student knows they're in a pre-AP course and thus knows that when they finish their 2 years of pre-AP English, they are, in fact, prepared for AP and thus should be just as comfortable jumping into AP as any other student.
So a simple word change can change your mindset. Yeah, that's great.
Right. The other is really trying to redefine what honors is and supporting that with a lot of project-based learning. So this year, for the first time, every 9th grader in the school will be engaging in an interdisciplinary project-based learning body of work at the end of spring semester. And those teachers are working hard together to try and, really implement skills that include but are not limited to the academic, right? So what competencies do we want our students to have upon graduation? Obviously, academics is one of them, but it's not the only one, right? There's probably something civic we want of them. I mean, I know as an educator, I certainly want that. There's probably something entrepreneurial we want. There's something professional, maybe something personal. We want them to know their own passions. Whatever these things are, we can bake them into project-based learning in a way that allows us to use that as a metric of more than just academic competency, and also provides them with the voice and choice necessary to build something that they see as relevant.
So are you getting any, I don't know, pushback from teachers? Because, for a lot of teachers, that really is a total shift in how they teach, especially if they're very traditional types of teachers.
This isn't a mandate-based school. It's very much. Would you agree with that, Tim?
Sadly.
Yeah.
Well, sadly, but not. I mean, I guess. I mean, it's not a mandate-based school. I wish we could figure out how to do a better job of selling ideas. But he's right. Like we're not a school where Greg. I mean, he's our AP coordinator. But Greg can't come into a teacher and say you have to teach this way, and this is what we're expecting now. It's just not going to fly.
So are the teachers that are part of this then just voluntary, or is it everyone? Like how's that work?
Well, so a little bit of both. So in addition to I can't go tell them, nor can I go to our principal or our school leader and say, hey, tell them to do this. That's just not the way our school operates. And it has its drawbacks. If you wanted something done immediately, quite frankly, Columbia probably isn't the country for you, but this school wouldn't be either. The sense of urgency that really stymies a lot of urban schools isn't in existence here. So if you want something done, you have to sell it. So before this year began, I spoke with the leadership and got this idea kind of rolling. And then we went to the departments and, pitched the idea to the departments. Generally, people were relatively excited about it. And then they chose the 9th grade teachers based on the people who were most excited about it. So once we sold the department leads, then we intentionally chose the teachers who would work well with this. And then because they are just so difficult in every single last one of them, the math department, we said, you don't even have to participate if you don't want.
That darn math department. Actually, though, that is not surprising, and it probably is actually very true because it's hard to change.
Yeah.
Math
ways teachers
of teaching math.
Yeah, math teachers are just the worst. I'm kidding. Having run professional development, I think we all know English teachers are by far the worst. But it was fascinating because we offered it up, and because we have tracking in math, and it's grade advancement. So we have an algebra course and a geometry course. The algebra course teachers said, "Let's do this." I'm
nice,
super happy to do this. And about a month in, the geometry teacher, who we really thought was very unlikely to participate, and quite frankly didn't actually invite her, got wind of it and asked if she could be a part of it. So now she's engaged, and she's fully engaged. Again, I mean, it's, we pretend like these best practices for students are just for students, but they work the exact same for adults, right? So you give the adult a voice and choice, and all of a sudden they belong there, and it's relevant to them, and they're working to be successful.
And Greg's not going to toot his own horn, but not only does he know his stuff as he's sharing with us, but he's a phenomenal salesman.
But okay, so even though you're saying your school is not mandate and you have to sell it, I almost think that's what needs to happen in the schools where there are mandates, because a lot of time, if something came along like this and was mandated, you would have a lot of anger on teachers' part because they didn't feel they had a say in the matter, and resentment, and they would resist it, and it wouldn't change. And that tends to be what happens. So it's almost like we need a combination of mandate and sales pitch kind of thing, voluntary.
It's really leadership 101.
Yes.
I mean, even if you can force people to do things, like I mean, even whether I was in business or as a principal, I rarely wielded that weapon, because you can only wield it once in a while. Because if folks don't actually buy into it, I can make you do something. But either A, you're not going to do it, or you're not going to do it well because you're not inspired to do it. So, I mean, it sort of works really well, I think, and fits into, Greg's strengths in terms of how we do it at the school, because he has to sell it. And then the teachers, they want to be part of something that's engaging. And honestly, to give teachers credit, even teachers who might have a traditional, unintentionally racist view of AP, I've never met a teacher who doesn't want all of their kids to excel. They just have mental blocks in terms of what they believe is and is not possible, because they haven't experienced it, which is to Greg's point about modeling and needing to see it. And So you get that opportunity to not only hear about it, but see it, and then be given the option to have a voice and be part of it and buy into it. And I would think that you're going to have more success, whether you're talking about AP or whatever.
Really anything. I
Right.
think we all go in with the assumptions about students and what they can or cannot do because we haven't experienced anything different.
Right. And it's fascinating, right? Like, to Tim's point, like, every teacher wants to be that teacher who's successful with all students, right? Every teacher sees Stand and Deliver and says, I want to be Jaime Escalante. Right? Like,
wow. I haven't heard that mentioned in years. I don't think our younger listeners, and I'm just going to pretend that we have younger listeners, I don't think they know
you
who
might
that
know him better
is.
as Edward James Olmos.
Just for the record, Greg has reminded me more than once that he's significantly younger than I. So if he's bringing this up,
someone out there must know it. But so every teacher wants to be that teacher who can reach every student. And every student, I remember realizing this once when I was doing an English class where I had them do like a little reading survey beforehand. And I asked them what they read most recently and why. And one of my freshmen, this is in a class where we used to put kids who were scoring pretty proficient on the state exams. One of my students said she tried to read the dictionary, and under why, she said, I don't know, because I guess I wanted to be smart. And of course she did. Like, what student doesn't want to be? Your student in an inner city classroom who sits in the back and is doing absolutely nothing and skips class whenever possible and gives you every reason to believe he hates you. That student also wants to be smart. Like, every student wants to be smart and successful, and every teacher wants every student to be smart and successful. So it's fascinating that there are so many things in the ether that get in the way of us successfully supporting one another to achieve the goals that we all share. It's really interesting to witness. And I think I'll tell you what excites me about these types of conversations is that it's not just about academics, right? And you don't get to do this at a school that is in constant crisis. So this is a great kind of test kitchen. But at a school like ours that has a storied academic past, you can academically vertically align, right? From AP down to kindergarten, pre-K. But simultaneously, you can build out this notion of competencies that are valuable to a graduate that are beyond the academic, the competencies that we talked about before. And you can create a graduate profile that achieves a clear definition of those competencies. And you can even embrace AP courses. And High Tech High would never believe this, but you can embrace AP courses that focus on measuring student achievement on a graduate profile and then backwards map from those. So you could have an AP capstone program, which we do, and you could have every student engage in that 12th grade research course, which we do. And you could make that a metric of the graduate profile and backwards map that metric through the years through multiple project-based learning activities that are inevitably leading to greater independence on the student's behalf. So in 9th grade, you have one that your teachers are all supporting, but you're doing most of it outside of class. In 12th grade, your teachers are not supporting it. You are picking and choosing what content you want to implement from the courses you've taken. And you could backwards map that all the way through the school. And you could actually have a school that is focusing on this notion of fostering the development of essential 21st century skills, but still be backwards mapped from what we normally consider academic rigor in advanced placement. And I think that's what really excites me about working in this environment is I think we have a chance to try something out in a safe environment, a modest and safe test, right? To stay with human systems theory, that we could then potentially scale and replicate to environments that are quite frankly not so safe.
You're right. I do think that is a deterrent in many schools and districts is there isn't that safe environment. There is the pressure that you must perform at this level and there is no time to try something new and have a dip in scores or whatever. So that I think that prevents a lot of change in education.
And I know this is maybe more true for math than it is for other areas, but one of the things that grates me, you talked about passing rates earlier, is you go to a school and the school has these great AP math passing scores. Sorry if you're hearing the ambulance in front of my apartment. But they have fabulous AP passing scores, and then everyone's like, "Oh, that AP calculus teacher is awesome. Look at these passing rates." I'm like, "I'm sorry. You're the end of a process. Like, if the AP passing rates are good at a school, then the entire math department and the students and the parents and the administration should be commended. Conversely, if the scores aren't what a school is wanting, then that's really a responsibility that the entire department should be taking on. Now, that's not always true. I don't know, Greg, who you and I are going to get to blame if our AP computer science scores aren't what we want them to be. Since there isn't like a build-up course.
I'm planning on blaming you.
There, knock yourself out.
Yeah, I think that's a good decision, Greg. I'd go with that.
He can. Like 15% of his class is related to me. So
that's accurate.
So there is some partial responsibility that I guess I'll take. Anyway, it really is, like, to me, like the whole AP, it's an AP community. And so you have to look at your successes and your challenges as a community. All right, questions that I'm just interested to hear from you. First question is, what do you see as the value difference between dual enrollment versus AP courses? Like, why take AP calculus versus taking calculus 1 at the local community college?
Maybe can we explain the difference, because I don't know that everyone will know.
So, I mean, I've taught at schools where the school district will have a partnership, usually with the local community college. I don't know if four-year schools do this or not, but that's not been my experience, where students will take a course, and I'm giving math examples because that's what I know, right? Where students could take Math 1 or Calc 1 through the community college rather than the AP course. And then they wouldn't have to pay for it. It would be part of they would get high school and college credits simultaneously. Usually the high school calculus teacher would be named an adjunct at the community college. So the teacher would have to be certified both to teach a community college course as well as the high school course. And then kids would get that college credit.
Versus if you just take AP, you have to pass the test to get the college credit. Right? Isn't that the difference?
Well, pass the test, and depending on this college you're choosing to go to, what score they require and whether they'll take it at all.
So when we first received this grant in Colorado and I started running this program, the U.S. Department of Education had also provided the same funding to the state of Indiana. And our friends over in Indiana did a study comparing and contrasting dual enrollment, AP, and international baccalaureate. And generally what they found, and the IB work was the International Baccalaureate, which is another college level program, it was a little thin because they didn't have quite as many schools. But essentially what they found is that IB tends to be a diploma program where if you take one course, you take the full track. Everything is IB that you take. And for that reason, it's beneficial in that it provides you with an education that your courses are intentionally working together in a way that AP and dual enrollment do not. But in another way, it's limiting because it's very clearly the deep end of the pool. Concurrent enrollment, and this is something or dual enrollment. This is something I always told to my students when I taught AP is, it has its benefits and disadvantages as well, right? So you're much more likely to get college credit in a dual enrollment course. However, there's no metric for proficiency provided. So, you get a C from your professor. Well, is that an indicator of how proficient you are? Or is that just a grade you receive from a professor? So, your guarantee to be prepared for college is less. Our ability to tell you how much you know is subjective to the point of just one individual, rather than a pretty well-designed assessment. And there's just a little bit of research I toss to support that concept. And one is that, there's a study out there that analyzes students who earned qualifying scores on introductory level college courses and compares them to students who passed those introductory level college courses on campus. So I got an AP Calc AB score of 3. You took Calc 1 on campus. And when they look at their intermediate scores, the GPA is significantly higher for students who earned the qualifying score in the AP exam. So earning the qualifying score in the AP exam is actually an indicator of greater knowledge, according to intermediate GPA, than getting a passing grade in the course on campus. So I think there's a guarantee of rigor that you don't necessarily get, or a guarantee of knowledge gained that you don't necessarily get in concurrent enrollment courses. That being said, I have a niece who started school as almost a junior, largely because of concurrent enrollment. So if you want college credit, I would still argue that concurrent enrollment is your fastest path. Yeah.
I mean, and I will say anecdotally, so my son's a freshman in college this year, and he's studying engineering. He took AP Calculus and AP Chemistry, made threes on both of them. So passing in the world of College Board, but his engineering school wouldn't accept anything less than a 4. And in some ways, I'm almost grateful.
Definitely.
Because he had that rigorous experience, and now he's sitting in those chemistry, and it's sort of a nice launching pad into university. Like, he's in classes where he's confident. He's confident that he can succeed.
Brilliant.
He will tell you that it's helped him get dates because he's been able to tutor some of his classmates in chemistry, is what he informed me. And I think I made his AP chemistry teacher's life when I shared that information with him. He thought that he has value as a teacher.
If you ever need to recruit students for an AP course against a dual enrollment program at your school, if you can bring up you're more likely to get dates in college angle, man.
All right. And here's my other question is, this isn't true where we work now, but I have taught, like when I taught AP statistics in Texas, I spent a good chunk of time just pitching and selling to kids on actually taking the test. I had a bunch of kids that would sign up for the course because it was a school, like many schools, that offer the additional GPA points for taking AP courses. And so the kids signed up for the course because they wanted the GPA points, but they didn't want the pressure of taking the test. To you, how important is it to you that kids take the test? And what would be your response to kids who are would take the course, but would be reluctant to take the test?
Yeah, you're going to think this is odd, but I haven't honestly come down on a tight position on that one. How important is it that you take the test? Well, I had a professor once who told me you don't fatten the cow by weighing it. I would argue it's unimportant to your learning. And we're in the business of student learning. That being said, if we don't have any way to determine what you've learned, we don't have any well-designed metric, how have we created a course that's any different than what I just described with concurrent enrollment, other than that you're less likely to get college credit, right? So in a sense, like all data, right, it only helps the person who needs it. And I guess I would be fine with individual students saying they don't want to take the test, particularly students who, and I think in all well-run AP courses, this should be every students who know what they're going to get on that test, right? It shouldn't be a surprise. Just like when I hand back an essay, I don't want some kid turning it over and be like, whoa, I never saw that coming. If you know for a fact that, a 2 is your goal on the test, I'd argue that maybe you should save the money. But I think the College Board's done a pretty good job of finding ways to subsidize student test expenses in an effort to get more students to take it. Now, granted, that's probably financially motivated in a lot of ways, but I also think that data is valuable to schools so they can get a sense of
how good the course is.
Yeah, like the course quality, like how, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with that answer either, though. And this is why I keep not coming down on one side of the fence or not, because is that really helping us determine course quality? Like if I found out that your pass rate was 20%, would that imply to me that what exactly? So I guess what I'd love to see is a school that didn't care at all about any of these things, allowed students to take tests to get college credit if they wanted to, just to help themselves post-secondarily, and then carefully tracked college remediation rate, because that's inevitably, if we're saying the high school diploma equates to college and career readiness, and we know for a fact that we can't determine what career readiness is, then we should be looking at how prepared were they when they got to college? How many of them required a remediation course? Because we know that these students who take a remedial course have something like a 17% chance of ever earning a degree if they even take one. So I think in terms of the academic competencies, that's what we should be looking at. I guess that's where I'm going to land. I'm going to land on I don't care about the test.
So, Greg, just next time when we're socializing with my wife, do not share that opinion. Because it was the biggest, one of the biggest, that makes it's making it over dramatizing it. Of the few things my wife and I disagreed on academically, I was always if you take an AP class, you take the AP test. Why the hell are you taking the class? So I always, and then she would acquiesce to me, even though she totally disagreed with me. So our kids always took the test when they took AP classes.
So, Tim, you know what's coming up the next time we go out to dinner.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't know if I feel that way today, but that was the way we were the kids.
And to be totally transparent, I'm not sure I feel that way either.
So Greg, we have a last question for you, and this is actually for all three of us. So we new to season 3, we have a new feature to end our interviews and our podcast episode, which is we're going to ask you to share one thing from your relatively recent professional experience that inspired you, and one thing that crushed you.
I think I've shared the thing that inspires me the most right now. I am extraordinarily, I dreamed that I would come to this school. In my interview, the principal actually said, initially I was interviewing for an English teaching position. And then, this AP possibility came up, and then this vision of what we want to do as a school by 2025 came up. And then he said he actually saw me sit up and wipe my shoulders off. And he's like, all of a sudden, it's like a whole different interview. It was like a guy who actually wanted the job. So that's what I'm really excited about. I'll tell you what, what crushes me. I mean, Python is on the short list right now. But honestly, I think
that requires some context. Just quickly, so one of the things that Greg did to help us in terms of really making AP accessible to all learners is he pushed for our school to offer this AP Computer Science Principles course, which is really an AP course designed specifically to engage all learners and make STEM AP courses accessible to all learners. And so he pushed it. And I asked if I could teach it, and got lucky and was asked to teach it. We recruited specifically. We met with our learning center, our special education department, to what are the kids who have learning differences who can be successful in the right environment. And so we have this amazing group. And then we were wondering if we were going to have enough kids to make the course work. So then we had enough for one section, and then we had enough for 2 sections. And I was going to teach both, but then we had even more. We needed 3 sections. And I'm like, I can't teach 3 sections. I am a math teacher. So Greg stepped up and is teaching the AP Computer Science Principles class with me. And we're about to start our Python unit, which is why he said Python is crushing him.
Which is a coding language for those of you who are not up on that. Okay, so Python crushes you. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and my background is not computer science. But I think more than that is, we have an excellent staff. It's the strongest faculty I've ever had the pleasure of working with. They know their stuff. They know their kids. They're dedicated. They're hardworking. And, on occasion, they're a bit domineering and a little bit of divas. And the arguments that I run into in this AP role are fully maddening. So I guess it crushes me when the teachers I work with, who I know are smart people, who I know are invested in their jobs, just don't have any faith in their students, and it's beyond the point of I'm afraid of losing control of my classroom, and it's all the way to this notion of I'm the only one who knows what's best for my students. And so in every manner, from the projects that I'm going to allow them to engage in, to the inquiry that I'm going to provide, to, whether they can take, if they have a conflict with an AP, with two AP exams, can they make the decision of which one gets moved to a different date? That's hard for me because I respect these people in so many ways. And then they say things and I'm like, what?
I can relate. All right, Tim, what's inspired you and what's crushed you?
Mine are related to what Greg was talking about. So we talked about this class for teaching and Python crushing it. But I just wanted to share another anecdote of a story. Like, this is why it works. So there's one of the students that we recruited. I taught him last year in pre-calculus, but a struggling learner, accommodations. He had a co-teacher to help in the class. Sweetest kid, and had the spirit of a saint. I told him at the end of the year last year that I admired him more than any of my students because the kid just would not give up. He's like, I'm going to learn this. And we spent a whole lot of time and he got there. And so I encouraged him and he signed up for the AP principals class. And the kid is just flying. Not only is his programming outstanding, but the multiple choice part, which is definitely you need to be able to read, synthesize your reading, just like any rigorous course. He's got like the third highest grade in our class right now. And it's just, so he's just an inspiring kid. So yay, Danny. I won't say his last name because he's a kid, but yay, Danny. And then in terms of what crushes me is really what we were talking about before. I've given up on the tracking fight for now. That's fine. But just when I talk to not only my colleagues, but I teach my math class. I teach is our lower level math class, and even when I catch myself reducing the rigor and sort of like giving up on my students, and when I see it in myself, when I see it in my colleagues, it crushes me, and I'm like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to get there? I've been reading books and listening to other podcasts and things, and I'm like, oh gosh, I need to be better. So not to beat myself up, but that's what crushes me is when I see the times when I let those opportunities go to empower all my students and when we as a team fail to do that.
Yeah, but now you're aware of it, so you're going to stop it more. So that's good. Right?
Yeah, let's hope.
So for me, I teach at a university and I'm teaching a geometry course right now. And it's not a class about learning geometry. It's about how to teach geometry from a conceptual, understanding. And they're all math teachers. So they're in the classroom. And I have this one, and she came into the class with, I teach geometry and I actually know more than you. And this class is ridiculous. And last week she learned something new and was like, I didn't think I'd ever learn anything new, but oh my God, I have a whole new insight and this class is great. So I was like, yeah. So I'm inspired that teachers who think that they are done learning have, realized that they can actually keep learning and learn something new, even if you've been doing it for 10, 15 years. So that was inspiring for me. And then what crushes me is our school district here, school board, it's just become this horrible hotbed of racism and anti-Semitism. There was a school board meeting last night, and just to realize how much hatred from parents exists, and that's coming out, and that people are not afraid now to just talk about and make, say things that are just totally horrible. And it's out there in the public, and to realize that that's this underlying current. So that crushed me this week.
I actually, if I may, I want to change my crush because that actually reminds me.
Okay.
The school that Omar, the Ghanaian refugee, came to me and told me he wanted to take AP Lang at the school in Denver that I worked at. I just got a message from a teacher, friend of mine who still works there, and I emailed her because I'd read in the Denver Post that their school was going back to online learning, but not because of COVID. And it didn't have more information. I said, what's going on? She said 5 teachers have quit since the beginning of the school year. They're absurdly overwhelmed. There's no social emotional development support. They've got huge numbers in their classes because so many teachers have left. They're covering each other's classes all the time. So it's an absolute disaster. And she gets through the days, quote unquote, by being numb. And, last year I remember thinking here at CNG, at this private school, where my average class size is around 12 and 100% of the students attend every day, that, God, it's so easy. It's just so easy when we provide supports to the teachers, when we have, what do we have, 7 counselors, when we have tiny class sizes, it's so easy. It's so easy to achieve that growth. And we just, despite all of our emotions around, education politically that you're talking about, and the vitriol that we bring and everything that we throw at it, we don't. We do a terrible job of supporting our American public school teachers, and it's so depressing. It's just so depressing that, when I think about, okay, this is the test kitchen, and then how do I bring this back to the States? Well, it's going to be way different in the States because, they're going to have disasters occurring all the time, and schools that are closing down because there's not enough teachers. And so they're just going online for a couple of days. And, there's so many real obstacles, and these poor principals who have to work 18-hour days. And if they don't get results in 2 years, are going to find themselves, hitting the pavement. That crushes me. It crushes me that we can't so simply do this there.
I would agree.
Greg, thank you so much for...
Thank you, guys. No, seriously, I realized, we're over time. It was real long. Like, I would love to have this type of conversation on a weekly basis. Like, it would fill my cup.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. Another brilliant episode. So, of course, this is the part where we do the traditional podcast thing and ask for favors. And leave a rating. I mean, if you listen to podcasts, you know this already, but leave a rating because that helps move us up and helps people looking for education podcasts find us more easily. So thank you all very much, and we will see you next time around.